I think one of the most important strategies is to understand where that stakeholder is coming from, right? So if I'm meeting with my finance person, the conversation will be a bit different than if I'm meeting with my manager or our CHRO or our HR business partner, right?
So what does it really take for your business to attract world-class talent today? I'm Dave Travers, president of ZipRecruiter. And on Talent All-Stars, we shine a light on the people and the day-to-day processes behind recruitment and retention at some of the world's most influential businesses. So if you watched a lot of the Olympics like me, you owe our guest today a big thank you. That's because Suzan Vulaj is the VP of Global Talent Acquisition for NBCUniversal, which broadcasts the games and employs about 35,000 people worldwide. Suzan's had quite the career journey, from joining Google straight out of college to leadership roles at Pitney Bowes and McGraw-Hill before landing at 30 Rock, where she navigated the chaos of COVID and the Great Resignation. Later in this episode, Suzan shares more about her own career path. But first, let's jump right in with a question that will come up again and again in this podcast. And that is, how can you, as a talent leader, tell your story more effectively and advocate for the resources your team needs? Here's Suzan.
I think one of the most important strategies is to understand where that stakeholder is coming from, right? So if I'm meeting with my finance person, the conversation will be a bit different than if I'm meeting with my manager or our CHRO or our HR business partner, right? I don't go in with the same approach with everyone. And sometimes I'm in a meeting with everyone together, but I have already socialized my plan with people before going in there. So everyone's aware. And I like when people poke holes at my work, because then it helps sort of like round me out in terms of being prepared for any meeting or any question that I get. Yeah, my conversations with finance are different. You know, they're all about budget and money and value and cost savings, right? I think one of the most important things to do is to understand the why. Like, why is this important? Why would my CHRO care? Like, what benefit? How would it benefit the business? And so I think going in and showcasing why this is important, the impact it'll have, and then the impact it'll have to the business is super critical. If you go in there just one-sided and only care about yourself and your team, you're not showing any value. And we've got a ton of investment back into our TA team. We have a new ATS after like 10 years. We finally got that with the new CRM, the self-scheduling tool. We have structured training for our TA folks. We have sort of offsite, meetings that we now have with our leaders. So it's been great. We've had a lot of investment back into our TA team because people are starting to realize how important our function really is, and that we don't just fill requisitions. That's been years in the making, and like going on these road shows and explaining to people and just getting in front of folks. It's a lot of it has been getting the TA team buttoned up and a very clearly defined bar of what great or success looks like, and then going to our HR partners and then going to the business. So we have a senior HR meeting that happens every so often, and TA now has a seat at that table. We never did. And so it's been really great to, one, be in those meetings because I get the floor, I get to present, I get to talk about things that are really important to us or things that are happening in the market that impact our business and so forth. So that's been really great.
A couple things that I heard there that I love. One is you start out by wanting to understand where the other person is coming from. And what that implies, by the way, is that you're listening rather than selling. Which is in when selling anything, whether it's internally or in a sales role or in your promoting your own career path to your boss or whatever, listening first rather than selling first is always the right way to sell. So understanding where your stakeholder is coming from, I love that. And then two, what you made clear is that you really crave feedback, and everyone's had the experience of someone coming to them for permission or for sign off or whatever, and they've made up their mind and they just want you to say yes. They don't want to make any changes. And we've all experienced that. And it's not nearly as much fun as feeling like you're an actual thought partner and you had some role to play. So going to people early, as you're describing, and really making it clear in your words and your actions that you're like, that's a great point. Q2 is a much more natural time to roll this out than Q1, given our business or whatever it is. And making people feel like, wow, I really had an impact and made this, pitch much better. All of a sudden they like the pitch better. And that is such a smart way of approaching the whole thing. I love that. One thing that I think is a big challenge for TA leaders is that coming up through TA is that you don't have a ton of experience managing technology, and technology is so central to the core of everything TA leaders do today. How did you approach that, or how would you advise somebody who's now all of a sudden tasked with, should we switch our ATS or not, and they've never taken on a software RFP process before, and the CIO is telling them this is how you do it and this is the vendor I want you to use or whatever, and like, how do you approach that as a business person who's taking that on for the first time?
Yeah, well, I think because I was a recruiter, I have the hands-on experience, and I still want to know today. I joke with my team, how many clicks does it take to make an offer? Like, I want to know everything, right? Our team at NBCUniversal, we have an operations team that sits within TA. They are centralized and they support our whole global TA team. And in that team, we created 4 verticals. One of them is focused on technology. So we've hired experts who know what they're doing when it comes to recruiting technologies, and they have insights and they have experience and they have recommendations. They've done RFPs before, et cetera. So that's been very instrumental in anything that we roll out. The other thing is we work very closely with our HR operations team. There is a very, very tight partnership there between the two teams, that we obviously don't make decisions in a vacuum with any technology. And whenever we do a demo, we, of course, include them because they're going to have to help implement it and manage the technology once we do. So the sooner we get the right stakeholders involved, the better.
So now fast forward, you're getting to the point where you're comfortable speaking up in your career and you're still working hard. When was the moment for you where you realized, hey, this might not just be a job, this might be a career, and I might not just be a recruiter, I might be a people who leads teams and lays out strategy for how talent should work?
When I was a tech recruiter back at Standard & Poor's, I looked at my boss at the time, who was a director, and I wanted to be her. Like, I just admired her very much. And I thought to myself, well, if she can do it, then I can do it. Right. And so I sought out mentors, like informal mentors and coaches and people in other parts of HR that would take the time to meet with me. And I would ask them questions about, like, what can I do to become a director here and manage a recruiting team? Like, I have no experience managing people. And so I got a lot of advice about, like, maybe you should start a project, run a project, cross-functional teams, et cetera. So that was really great. But it was in my mid-20s when I said, okay, I want to be a director and run a recruiting team. And so when I went to Pitney Bowes, that's when it happened. I became a director. I started managing a team, and it was not easy. Managing people is not easy. It is not for the weak. I tell people all the time. And I grew a lot. I continue to grow. But when I became a director, I really grew because I was so set in my ways as a recruiter that I had expected everyone to operate that way. And I really had to learn to embrace the diversity of people's backgrounds and their style. And that's why today I say every recruiter has their own style. And, like, you have to respect that and you have to learn to work with that because you can't change the way people operate, And so when I became a director, I was like, okay, this is it. And then when I came to NBCUniversal, I really started to think about, what's my next job? Like, what's my next role? Like, I love the company. It was so great. I was very lucky to get in. And so I had sort of my name on this job and said, this is what I wanted.
I love, there's so many golden nuggets in there. There are two that stand out to me. One is, at the very beginning of your journey, you were practicing positive self-talk. You were saying, if she can do it, I can do it. And that is not intuitive to some people. It's super intuitive to some people. It's not. But the like psychology research is really clear that works. And the thing that people who struggle with that don't often appreciate, which I love how you did it, is you don't actually have to believe the words you're telling yourself to get the benefit of positive self-talk. Like if you're down on yourself, just saying the words, if that person could do it, I can do it too, will give you the benefit, even if there's a nagging feeling or it feels dishonest to yourself or whatever. I love that. And then, making the transition from individual contributor, superstar to now first-time manager, what I loved what you talked about was embracing the diversity, which means so many different things, but embracing other people do the job differently than you did. And as a superstar individual contributor, it's often hardest to become a manager. People who aren't quite as good sometimes become managers better because as a superstar, you know exactly how you would do your team's job. And when you see them varying by 2% from what you would do, it's really frustrating because you know what works. But you gotta, as to your point, you gotta give people the room to do it a little bit their own way while also making good judgments about like, there's some core fundamentals that we can't vary from here. So how, as you then think about, okay, now you're not just leading a team, you're going to NBCUniversal, this huge company that is famous and does all these amazing things. Like as you started your journey toward NBCU and thought about your current role in it, if I recall correctly, you didn't start out as the VP of Global Talent Acquisition. How did you think about that part of your journey where now you're really moving up in the world and leading leaders of teams, not just leading a team yourself? How did that go for you?
Yeah, it was a scary transition, to be honest with you. And I think another piece of advice I would give people is that every job you take should scare you a little bit. Like if you want to build a career and continue to move up, the job should be bigger and it should make you a little bit nervous that you want to be able to grow. There has to be that room for you to grow. Otherwise, it's going to be boring eventually. So for me, when I came in as a director, I was managing a team of roughly around 18 people total, right? Recruiters and 2 managers. And then my manager left and got a huge role at another company. And his boss said, I'd like for you to run the team in the interim while we look for a replacement. And I was like, okay, I'm so nervous. Like the time has finally come. And overnight, she's like, I want you to run the team. And so overnight, I went from managing a team of 18 to a team of about 130 people.
Wow.
And my manager was walking out the door, onto his next big job. And so that was a huge learning curve for me. And I was peers with all of my direct reports, and now I'm their manager. So, and I took the role in the interim. The job was posted, and my manager at the time said, I encourage you to apply for it and you should interview for it. And I did. And so I was doing the job in the interim for about 2 months. And I remember I was in a meeting with our chief talent officer. And in the middle of the meeting, she's like, Susan, I want you to have the job. And it was like, really? She's like, I want you to have the job. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, I won't let you down. I'm going to do the best I can here. And then the next day I got an official offer, an announcement went out, and I started managing the team. That was also during COVID, which was a crazy time for the market and for recruiting, and everybody was remote. That was hard, and we didn't have a ton of work to do. And then managing the team throughout the remote hybrid back to the work office, and then during the Great Resignation, right? The Great Reshuffle, whatever you want to call it, like that. Those have been some really trying times. And there's no playbook for TA leaders on here's how you should handle COVID, or here's how you should handle, the high attrition rates. So we were all going through things for the first time, not just TA, but even our HR business partners and our talent folks and our businesses. So it's been a lot the last 4 years.
Take me back to that moment where the chief talent officer, because this is a moment so many people dream about and you've gotten to live it. So take me back to that moment the chief talent officer said, I want you to have the job. Like, what did that feel like?
I froze. Like I literally froze. I had been working so hard for it. And deep down inside, I wanted the job so badly because it was the next best thing and keeping me at the company, because at this point I was already in love with the culture, with the people, with the team, with the company. So I wanted to stay, and this was the next best big thing. I was in shock a little bit And then when I hung up, I like froze. I needed time to digest what just happened, And I didn't even, it's not like she gave me an offer letter or anything. She was like, HR will follow up with all the details. And I'm like, great. But I remember calling my husband and telling him the news. And he was like, I knew it. Like everyone around me was like, I knew it. I knew you would get it. And they believed in me, which is so helpful. And so supportive. I, had a team, a village of supporters. But when I got it, I was like, okay, like here's the real work is going to begin in managing the team. But it's been so rewarding.
I get chills thinking about that.
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that. So okay, so you're given this huge new mandate. You've never had a job like the one you're taking on before. You're now managing all your peers. It's not like you've been at the company for 20 years and everyone saw this coming from years and years away. How do you approach that? How do you start? What's the, you're in this incredibly intimidating, exciting dream moment, but now you got to do something with it. Where do you begin?
Yeah. I sat down my direct reports in a meeting, like immediately after. I think Kara given me the offer like Thursday or Friday. And then by Monday, I had my direct reports in a meeting. And I approached it very openly and honestly and said, like, the clean slate for everyone. Like, we have worked alongside each other for 3 years. Some of us became friends, right? And know personal things about each other or things about their team and maybe performance issues that they're managing on their team or issues that they had with my former predecessor. Not issues with, but like, sort of things that they were dealing with or obstacles or things like that. So like it's a different relationship. And then now all of a sudden, very quickly, I became their manager. And I said, listen, like, I think you guys know how I operate. Very open-minded, very open door policy. Like, I want to do what's right for this TA organization. I'm very passionate about what I do. I will always put the team first and I want it to be successful. And I can't do that alone. It takes an entire team. So everybody's got to be on the same page. And then from there, I just really started to build my relationship with everyone, one by one.
I think what's so interesting about being in that situation as you advance in your career is that I think it's intuitive and right that when you're taking on a new leadership role, you have to project confidence. When you announce, for example, we're making this change, we used to do it this way and now we're doing it this way. You have to project confidence, and that's intuitive to people. What's often not intuitive that you just talked about is that being vulnerable is also a critical part of it. Like, they realize you're a human being. They've seen your resume, your profile before. They know you haven't done this 20 times before. And so being open and vulnerable is actually one of the most confident, inspiring things and exudes confidence that you're not going to just try to wave your hands past the fact you haven't done this before, but that you're actually, going to learn along with them about how this is going to work. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're in it together.
So I want to move to our rapid fire section here, which is a very specific form of rapid fire, which is I want you to envision yourself in the elevator at 30 Rock and the CEO or other senior executive walks in and is asking you these questions, and you've only got the 45 seconds or whatever it takes. So here we go. So Suzan, I'm asking you as the CEO or whoever it is, Suzan, what do you think is the number one way we should be measuring the success of the talent department?
I think our employee engagement survey results.
And what's the key metric in the survey?
We do a survey every 18 months. We ask a number of questions to our employees, and then we obviously look at it and dissect it. And then managers with certain amount of team members get to look at their data. But it's been great. They measure everything. We ask, how likely are you to recommend the organization? If you were offered a similar position somewhere else, would you stay, et cetera? So it's a really great indicator of the engagement of our business, of our employees.
I love that one. The question of, think of your most professionally talented friend, first person who just pops in your mind. Would you recommend that they come work at the company? Is such a great question. So, okay, back to the elevator pitch here. So what's the biggest challenge that the talent team faces over the next 12 to 18 months?
I think what we've seen for the past 4 years is the pressure that HR has felt to pivot and be flexible and work on things that they've never done before. Like I said, the Great Resignation and COVID and return to office, these 3 big things have never happened before in our lifetime. And so we as HR professionals are supporting our clients the best we can with these first time situations. So I think continuously pivoting and being flexible and learning and being open is going to be key for any HR professional moving forward.
There's no textbook for what we've been through and where we are. Okay. And then finally, there's obviously skills and experience, but what personality traits do you look for when you're interviewing somebody for your team?
It's a great question. I think grit is probably my number one answer to that question, because you can learn anything. You can learn how to be a manager, tech recruiter, HR professional. You can learn that stuff. And when you have the passion and the fire in the belly and the desire and the ambition and persistence, that will come. So all of it will come if you have the grit.
You and I are so aligned on this, because we managed to make it through a whole podcast without saying the word AI. But everyone knows that the skills all of us are going to need 3 or 5 years from now. Not only do I not have those skills and no one else does either today, no one has those skills. Like, they're going to change. And so showing that you have the tenacity and the grit to figure out what you need to know, since it doesn't exist yet today, is so critical. And at the same time, it's an incredible leveler of the playing field, because if you're at a disadvantage in terms of experience or title or whatever to someone else, the game is about to change. This is your opportunity to show grit. I love that. Well, Suzan, It is very clear after getting to spend time with you why you're a talent all-star. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today. We really appreciate you being with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. It was great.
That's Suzan Vulaj. She's VP of Global Talent Acquisition for NBCUniversal. We'll put her LinkedIn profile in the notes below. And just a reminder, we're an audio podcast too. So if you want to listen on the go, just search Talent All-Stars in your favorite podcast app and tap follow. And if you have feedback for us or ideas for future episodes, send us an email at talentallstars@ziprecruiter.com. I'm Dave Travers. Thanks for listening to Talent All-Stars. We'll see you back here next week.